So welcome back and thank you so much. This presentation is not about technical skills. We have been talking about the action planning methodology since the networking and orientation session. And actually yesterday we tried to help you to start working in the advanced preparation form for your action plan. Action planning is a valuable leadership skill which facilitates continuous improvement in your agency and that would help you to deal with specific problems faced by your agency. This is just a tool. This is some kind of, how to say, project management, but in a compressed way that can help you to solve problems at your agency, as I mentioned it. Challenges may present themselves in a variety of ways. It may be from the crisis that requires an immediate actions and an immediate response, or it may simply be a need of a change given the change of the evolving circumstances. So this is something that someone asked yesterday. The problem could be anything else that is important for you or your agency. It could be as important as to manage a crisis or as simple as to, for example, to improve communication between departments. What action planning helps you to do is to break out all this huge challenge or this huge problem into small steps that are more manageable for you and for your agency to find a solution. So let's start. Can you see the screen, the full screen? I don't know, Pascal, if we can make the screen bigger. I don't need the notes. Okay, I'm in control, so maybe I can do something. Is this site enough for you? I don't know if someone has comments. Because in my screen, I can see it very, very small.
It's okay for me?
Okay, if Edwin, it's okay for Edwin, and I think that it's okay for everyone else. So thank you, Edwin. So as I mentioned, this is a very valuable tool. This is a leadership skill tool that you can use. Actually, I was looking into my notes and I found my action plan advanced preparation for my first program with Toronto Centre about, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I just want to share with you some of the issues that I had to address at this time and that my agency was facing at this time. And I just remember that the general problem that I described at this occasion was that the financial statements and the financial information from one of the largest insurance company in Costa Rica, my country, were not accurate. So I identified a lot of things, problematic things with this situation. Some of them were that the accuracy of problems mentioned before have several implications. Between the most important ones, we can mention continuous internal processes, incorrect reporting from SUGESE to their stakeholders, obstacles to develop an appropriate analysis of the market, supervision gaps and misleading actions, and also serious. I'm sorry?
Have you started sharing, moving through the slide, or you're still on the first slide?
No, I'm just sharing a story. I'm not moving the slides yet.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm just sharing the story about why the action plans could be useful based on my personal experience with this specific action plan that I developed about 10 years ago.
Okay,
so what I wanted to highlight with this example is that in this occasion, I just tried to describe the problem, but into this problem, there are a lot of symptoms. For example, the continuous internal reprocess of the information, the incorrect reporting, the misleading actions, but those were not the root cause of the problem. That's something that I will address really in the presentation. That this was just one example of this situation that I faced, as I told you, about 10 years ago. Now I will move into the slides. So, as I mentioned to you, what we intend with the action plan methodology is to break down all these challenges that you have and help you to address the problem. So we will identify three main steps. The first one is to assess the problem. We are going to deeper in each one of these. The second one is to develop a solution. And the last one is to implement a plan. We are going to go deeper into the two first steps because are the most important in the context of this program. And the part of the implement plan, if you ask assistance from A2NI and Toronto Center, we can support you and assist you then with the implementation of your action plan. During the week, you will be preparing and working on the action plan per se. So let's go deeper into each one of these steps. As I mentioned to you, the first one is to assess the problem. Let me move the slides. I can do it here. Okay. So each one of these steps will be break down into smaller steps. So in the step of assess the problem, we will need to describe the problem, identify the causes of the problem, understand the effects, consider priorities, and at the end of this, we will state the problem precisely. What we asked you to do with the action plan advanced preparation was just to describe the problem in a very broad and general way. Okay. So let's go deep. Let's have a deeper look at assess the problem. We need to identify a problem. That this is something that I insisted a lot during the last 2 days and during the orientation session. This problem needs to be important and relevant for you, but also for your agency. So in this stage, this is first stage, what you need to do is to give a brief description of the problem that is understandable to a non-expert person. So anyone can understand what your problem is in a very brief description. The second step, is to identify the causes of the problem. This sounds very simple, but I think that this is one of the most challenging steps of all this action planning methodology. And I can say because of a personal experience and because of the experience of other participants in other programs, because the main challenge is to identify what is the root problem, what is the root cause of the problem, and what are the symptoms. We're trying, and we not in some natural way, we tend to confuse the symptoms with the root cause of the problem. And let me give you a simple example. This is not related to finance or supervision at all. It's related to health, but I think that is very simple to understand. For example, you go to your doctor and you say to your doctor that you have a stomach ache. So this is the symptom. You have a stomach ache, but you don't know what is causing the stomach ache. So the doctor will ask you if you eat something, maybe something that it wasn't bad or was, I don't know, a lot of fat, something like this. Maybe you have a gastritis, or maybe it could be an appendicitis. What I meant, I don't want to be dramatic, but what I meant is that there are a lot of root causes that are causing this symptom, your stomach ache, but the treatment that the doctor will give you will depend on the root of these causes. It's not just about to have some painkiller pills to alleviate the symptoms. It's important to deal with the symptoms, but at the same time, you need to identify the root cause of your problem. This is one of the most important parts of this methodology. So how can we understand and have the difference and differentiate between the root and the root causes and the symptoms? One of the most important things to take into account is to focus on correcting root causes rather than just the symptoms. This is something that I just mentioned. You just need to identify what are the roots and what are the symptoms. So the other important thing to take into account is don't ignore the importance of treating the symptoms in the short time. It's important. If you have a very, very strong pain, you need to deal with the symptoms. If you have a very difficult situation at your agency, you need to deal with the symptoms in a opportune way, but don't confuse the symptoms with the root cause. The third, realize that there can be and often are multiple root causes. maybe I have a gastritis because I eat something that was bad. So there are a lot of root causes that I need to consider when I'm analyzing the root cause of the problem. And this is something important. Focus on how and why something happened. Don't on who was responsible. Sometimes we lose a lot of time looking for the person responsible of the problem, and we don't focus on the how and the why the problem happened. And 5, be methodological. This is to find the cost-effective. You need evidence to back up the root cause that is affecting your situation. And last, consider how the root cause can be prevented or replicated into the future. In this case, to identify the root causes, we recommended a methodology. It's a very simple methodology that is called the 5 why approach. This is just as simple as asking 5 times what could be the root causes of your problem. So in this case, for example, I will share with you a very, very simple example. This is a real life example, not related to finance, to insurance, to supervision, but can give you a clear idea. So you are always late at work. So what would be my first why? So my first why would be I'm late because I missed the bus. So why I missed the bus? I missed the bus because I left the house late. So third why. So I left the house late because I rushed to get my kids ready. Fourth why. My morning routine was behind the schedule. So this is my fourth. But why was it behind the schedule? But my morning routine was behind the schedule because I have problem to getting my kids wake up on time. They refuses to wake up on time. So maybe here is where the real solution is. What do you need to solve your problem? You need to address this why. This is where the real solution can be found. So a likely root cause could be my child refuses to get up and causes a chain reaction that delay me and get me to get late to work. I know that this is very simple and in real life it's not that easy to apply, but it gives you an idea of this methodology of asking why at least 5 times. It's you can say, when can I stop? Okay, this is a lot of common sense, and if you are familiar with the situation, you already will know when is the real why, when you need to stop. So now that you have identified causes of the problem, you need to understand the effects. And to understand the effects, you need to identify what are your key stakeholders. So your problem might have a wide range of key stakeholders or just a few. I just remember the last presentation that Andrea did. She mentioned that in the case of insurance inclusive, could be at least, I don't remember exactly, but about 11 stakeholders related to other institutions. So just figure out how many stakeholders could be in the situation of your problem. And for this, we use an acronym that help us to identify, categorize, and understand your stakeholder. This is the method OUI. This is a we in French, so it means, I will show you easy what it means. That U is about upward, who would be the stakeholders, the ones that you report to. Outward, it's people outside your institutions, for example, the media, the trade associations, maybe the owners, the managers. And inward would be your peers, your staff, the people who you work in your institution. Now that you know and you understand what the effects could be for your stakeholders, it's important to consider priorities. So you have this problem, you need to understand the effects and evaluate the risks and benefits of acting now. What would be the benefits or the risks of acting now, of deferring the decision, of not doing anything at all? This is very important to consider. And also, This is something that was mentioned in one of the presentations before. You need to analyze your resources, expertise, people, systems, and legal framework. So do I have all the resources to solve this problem? This is something very important to take into account. So as I mentioned, you need to analyze the resources that you have, the systems, the people, the expertise, and the legal framework to know if you can move forward with your situation. And finally, after all these steps, and you will say why a lot of thinking to just arrive to the state of the precisely state of the problem, this is very difficult and challenging. I'm sorry, I need 1 second. The final step, is to define the problem in a very precise way in 2 sentences. Is something that we call in the elevator speech. Just let's assume that you are in the 1st floor and you get into the elevator with the superintendent or the CEO of the company, and you will go to the 10th floor. So you will have from the 1st floor to the 10th floor to convince and to persuade your stakeholder or your CEO or your superintendent about your problem. You need to precise the statement of the problem at maximum, in 2 sentences. And this is something that it's commonly said that a problem well stated is half solved. This is very important to consider because a clearly stated problem or challenge is the bridge between confusion and clarity. So this is the first step, and I know that it sounds kind of simple, but it's quite challenging because depending on how well and how clearly do you define your problem, you then can move to the next steps, that is to develop a solution. But at this stage, we will have a group activity just to try to define this statement, to clearly define the problem statement. So we already shared with you a short mini case with relate with the formation from an hypothetical country, Mediana country. What we are asking you is to work with your group to assess the problem, give it the action planning mini scenario that you will have. You just need to imagine that you are the director of supervision of the financial services authorities at Mediana, and the superintendent has invited you to a management meeting to discuss the latest developments and decide on actions to be taken. So what we're asking you is to use this methodology. This is 5 steps that I just described to you to state the problem. So you will have 15 minutes for discussion. For reading this just 1 page, the mini case scenario is just 1 page, and 5 minutes to present. The idea is to present just this state problem in a precise way. As I mentioned to you, 1 or 2 sentences. You have not to be limited, but this is the ideal case. And when thinking in this statement, you need to answer the following questions. What are the root causes? Consider micro and micro factors. Also, what are the effects? Who would be affected? That's the we model that to consider and to identify and categorize your stakeholders. And what are the priorities? Okay, just think about it. But at the end, what we are asking you is to have a precise state problem with the information of the case. There is not a correct answer. There are a lot of information in this page. So the approach of this statement will depend on, I will ask you to see the problem through the lens of your own experience and through the lens of your own agency. So we can split, I don't know, Rachel and Pascal, if we can start working the breakout rooms and share the template with a question. This is the same, actually the same template that I'm showing here. It's just to state the problem precisely. This is the task. Any questions, comments?
So everyone should have received these templates by email. So I included a Word document on the case study and then 2 PowerPoint templates named Activity 1 and Activity 2. So in this breakout session, you'll need the climate case study and the template for the Activity 1. And I believe the activity is also included in the case study Word document as well. So you might, I hope everyone has received this by email.
At this stage, it's just activity 1. It's just to precise, to state the problem. This is the only activity for this part of the session.
We might need a bit longer than 15 minutes, Patricia, just to give people time to read the case study as well, if that's okay.
Okay, maybe we can, I know that we are behind schedule. Maybe we can have 20 minutes, maybe 10 minutes to read this one page, but I know that people need to interpret the information, to discuss. Maybe we can have 20 minutes, and maybe let's see if we have enough time for the second activity, because the second activity is to state the goal, but this is something that anyway will be working during the week in each action plan. So it's something that we can manage if you want to.
Okay, thanks, Patricia.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll open the breakout rooms, and please, if everyone could check your inboxes to make sure you have the case study. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Basically, it's quite familiar in terms of understanding it and also its impact to the market.
Thanks, Robson. We'll go back to the main room and yeah, thank you for doing the conversation with Patrice.
Hi, Patricia. We're all back in the main room.
Okay, are we ready? Are everyone's come back? I think so. So maybe I know that it was a short time to read the case and to go through the questions, but generally speaking, maybe each of the group can present the view of what could be the problem, the state of the problem. So maybe we can start with group number 1. Who was volunteer?
Sorry, Patricia, I think it's not entirely clear who was group number 1, because we all had the same activity. So maybe call it out by the program leaders. That might be easier.
Okay, perfect. So okay, given that the short time, if one of the groups it's volunteer to present, because as Pascal mentioned, it's the same activity for everyone, and we can discuss based on this presentation. Any volunteer?
Yeah. I don't know, maybe Robson, if you would like to share some of the thoughts that we shared during our discussion.
Perfect.
I think it's fine. Let me share and make an attempt to see if we can. So I think from our group we've tried to go through the case study and pick some few things from the template, which will then culminate into us defining the problem. Our apology for the quality of submission. I think the time was a bit shorter for us to interrogate the case study. But in terms of root causes, I think what we picked is I think the country is experiencing a changing weather pattern due to climate change, and the market is exposed to a risk which they are not even clear of in terms of the impact of the risk and also how to deal with it, and also issues around how to manage the risk and take control of the situation, and also issues around capacity to deal with the problem now and also in the future. And in terms of what are the effects and who is affected, the effects are basically potential of substantial losses which may affect the entire economy. In terms of who is affected, we looked at the general populace. We also looked at regulator and also the government. Because I remember from the case that it's a new government that has been elected into office. It's looking forward to provide for its citizens, and it will be very embarrassing for the economy or the country to be exposed to such a risk when the regulator and the government is not even aware of the extent and the extent of exposure and how to deal with it. So in terms of priorities, I think what we picked from our group is, I think one of the major priorities first to understand the risk in terms of how to identify, measure and assess it, so that at least we can be quite aware in terms of what is it exactly that we are facing, and also try to come up with the mitigating strategies in terms of how to manage the current exposure or the risk that have materialized, and also coming up with the potential ways of dealing with potential future risk. So in terms of our problem now, we didn't have much time to look at it, but I think at high level, I think the problem that the country is facing is exposure to an emerging risk, which the country is not familiar with, including its effect to the economy. But I think with the time we could have fine-tuned this problem so that at least it would come out clearly and smart. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Robson. I think that it was very, very clear exactly the intention and as I mentioned, it is not the right answer for this case, but I think that the interpretation that you gave of this, it's very, very clear and very concise, because what's the problem at the end? We don't know what's the exposure of the country to climate risk events. We don't know how it would be affect the tourists. That is one of the main activities of the economy. We don't know how can it affect the crops, and we don't know how the financial institutions are already exposed to the climate risk, because the other things that is happening with FIDCO are just rumors, could be real, could not be real. So we need to focus on the real cause of the problem, and I think that you already did it really, 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 really good. I don't know if any other groups have any other comments or approaches. So I think that this exercise, I know that it was short time and we would need more time to develop it, but it can give you an idea of what we want from you in the action planning of your own countries, the way to think and to analyze, because we have a lot of information, a lot of macroeconomic information, microeconomic information, a lot of problems and issues and challenges at the same time, but we need to try to get focused on the problem that we want to address. And as I repeated 100 times, that it's important for you, that it's important for your agency to consider the priorities. What would happen if we don't address the problem right now? What would happen if we delay the problem? So this is just the first part. Pascal, I don't know if we will have time to finish the presentation. We have the second part that is assess the problem. I know that as I have seen that some people is leaving because they have meetings and other commitments.
Yeah, Patricia, maybe what we could do is actually, we could add a session on tomorrow and finish the second part tomorrow. Would that make sense?
Okay, perfect.
If that works.
Because I can hurry up with the second part, but I think that that is important. The second part is assess the problem. It was very important to take the time to this first time to take time for this first time to this first part to assess the problem, and tomorrow to develop the solution, because this is an important input for your action plan. So
thanks, Patricia. So actually, maybe during session 9 tomorrow, we can start off by the second part of this session, if that's helpful, and that will give us more time for the second breakout room as well.
Okay.
I'll inform participants that we're doing that, and that we've unfortunately run out of time, and for those that have already dropped off.
Okay.
So do you want us to end the session for today, Patricia, then, if that's the case?
Okay, I can end the session. I can do it fast, maybe 10 minutes. I can do it in 10 minutes.
Sure, not a problem. I can upload your slides again if that's helpful.
Okay, okay. I just need water.
Patricia, I don't think you have control of the slides.
Yes, I'm controlling. I think so.
Okay. I'm not sure you do. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I'm just trying to look for where we. Okay, I almost there. Okay, so the second part is develop the solution. Now we how to assess the problem and define the problem. As I said, problem well stated is half solved. So now develop a solution is almost the easiest part. So to develop the solution, we also are going to break this down into the smaller steps. The first one is establish the goal, then consider alternatives, outline the plan in a very broad way, assess the key stakeholders, and detail the action plan, and finally to evaluate the plan. So the first step is to establish the goal. This is I would say that this is the second most important part of the action planning methodology. The first one is to state precisely the problem, and the second is to establish the goal. We use the acronym specific. I know that a lot of people is familiar with this acronym. The goal needs to be specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. So let's see just an example of one goal. Is this smart? Increase the staff of the legal department. Not at all. So a smart goal would be increase the number of lawyers, this is specific, of the legal department in 20% in the next 2 years. So this goal is specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. Another example related to a specific problem. For example, I have this problem, this situation that I already identified. The pre-contractual information of microinsurance products is very long and difficult to understand by the underserved market, creating confusion for consumers who found it difficult to buy these policies, limiting the take-up. So what would be a smart goal for this problem? So issue new regulatory standards that specify the content and the form of the pre-contractual information of microinsurance products with a maximum period of 8 months. So it's specific, it's measurable, it's time-bound, it's realistic, and it's actionable. Now that we established the goal, we need to consider alternatives. We can have a lot of ways to reach the goal. For example, this is very illustrative. You can have a lot of type of bridges to cross the river. You need to think of all the alternatives available for you to reach your goal. And maybe the most obvious alternative could be the best, but this is not always the case. So you need to keep your mind open about the different alternatives. Then you can outline the plan. This is a very broad step. This is not a detailed plan. You just need to identify big steps that you think that will be needed to be done to implement the preferred alternative that you have chosen. Then you need to sequence this list of steps, and then you need to identify what could be the obstacles that might encourage and carry out these steps, and what would be the helpers for your situation. This is more clear in this slide. So for each one of the steps that you have identified, you need to identify what could be the barriers, could be the resources, political will, public will, expertise, and also the enablers. That could be financial means, legislative powers, influential stakeholders, and the public support even. Then the next step, and when we assess the problem, we identify with the OWI model who could be our stakeholders. Now we need to assess the key stakeholders, but we need to identify, to define who are the key stakeholders. Those are individuals with the power to hinder or help your plan. And you need to focus your strategy. That this is something that we will be addressing in 2 sessions about how to engage and communicate effectively with your stakeholders. So using the same model that we explained earlier, the OWI model, you can identify, categorize, and understand your key stakeholders with those ones who are upward, outward and inward to your institution. And this is something important to consider, because sometimes we think that maybe people is supportive and the engaging stakeholders is not that important, but this is crucial. Approximately 80% of the stakeholders will be in the mild to strong resistance to the at the onset of change. This is very common. People usually, and this is something part of our nature, we tend to resist the change. So we need to take into account that maybe 20% of the stakeholders will be resistors, 60% bystanders, they don't care, but you can develop a strategy to engage them, and 20% would be helpers. So we need to focus and to take this into account when developing our communication strategy. And this is something that I just mentioned. In 2 sessions, we will be focused on the Toronto Centre 4-box model to engage and effectively communicate with your stakeholders. And finally, you need to detail the plan. You 2 steps before you outline the big steps. Now you need to break out these steps into smaller steps. This is important that the description of these steps should be clearly indicate the action and the action that will be taken and the relevant intended the result that you are looking for. So you need to define what needs to be, what do you need to do, what needs to be done, when should be done, who is responsible of doing that, and how much is going to cost. So this is just an example of this kind of information, and this is the outline action plan that we will be asking you to work on during these next days. And some important things to take into account, there are some common mistakes. Usually competition data is overly ambitious, the resourcing is underestimating, and communication of the outline is not well thought out. This is part of the strategy of communication that is important to develop. And finally, you need to evaluate the plan. To evaluate the plan, you need to answer 3 main questions. So, will the plan achieve the desired outcome? Is really this plan to accomplish the goal that I stated at the beginning? Do I have the necessary resources available in terms of people, money, time, all the resources that we have mentioned? And how risky is the plan? What could happen if the plan goes bad? So in generally speaking, this is very graphic, but we always plan and everything is almost perfect to reach our goal, but reality it's far away from what we are planning. So expect the best, but be prepared for the worst. And finally, implement the plan. This is something that we delay for. We don't focus this part of the implement of the plan in this part of the program. But just to mention the different stages that we're considering when implementing the plan. The first one is to sell the plan, to involve all the stakeholders. The second one is to establish the governance structure. How are we going to handle the plan? How are we going to manage the project, the people, the time, the resources? We need to create a working plan. Beyond the detailed plan, we need to work with the working plan with specific goals, with the specific indicators, key performance indicators. We need to manage the project team. And finally, we need to prove accountability, showing good results, confirming the planning is advancing and the project is advancing. So we had another activity, but given the time, we are not able to complete it. It was about to state a SMART goal based on the statement of the problem that you identify in the activity number 1. But so this is it. Some questions, any comments? And through the week, we will be working based on this methodology. So I think that we can go deeper through the different individual and country group sessions and answer all your questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Patricia. And we'll go over this again tomorrow during session 9, if that's helpful as well. And then maybe we can do the breakout room then.
I think so.
Okay, great.
Gotcha. Okay, any questions or comments? I think that we are over time.
Not really tired, Patricia. I think we are still processing the information. I think we will be in a position to ask further questions as we try to implement it in practice. But it's actually an interesting approach to problem solving. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robson. I'm sorry to hurry up with the end of the presentation, but I will be here during the whole week for answering your questions and specific questions, general questions related to the methodology. Also, we share with you the action plan guide, Toronto Centre Action Plan Guide, that is very detailed in terms of the steps, and I hope it's helpful for you. Perfect. Great, thank you.
If there are no further questions, that's the end of today's session. And tomorrow we will have our third day, which will focus on climate change, one of the underlying themes of this training. And we'll be joined again by an external participant. The Bank of England will be presenting their climate risk framework, and that will be happening during session 8. But if there are no further questions, then that's the end for today, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.